Yo, what is up, everybody? John from Tau Tactics here, bringing you another video. Today we have the opportunity to speak with Drew Salzborn. Drew recently won a GT with none other than the Kroot Hunting Pack, featuring 18 Rampagers, 9 Kroot Riders, 6 Hammerhead chassis, and a bunch more. We talk through his matchups, his history of getting into Tau, and why he thinks Tau right now is an A-tier army, among other things. Hope you guys enjoy. Today's interview with Drew is sponsored by Hand Geek. Now, if you aren't familiar with Hand Geek, it's an online marketplace for buying and selling Warhammer minis, terrain, and stuff from a bunch of other different hobbies. The reason I choose to go with Hand Geek is because it charges just a fraction of the fees of other online marketplaces while being just as secure, and also even gives a kickback to local gaming stores like the ones you and I play at every single weekend. So if you're looking to buy up that new army or sell down your backlog while supporting your community, I would check out my link in the description below to sign up with Secondhand Geek today. Well, we have a very special guest today. Thanks, Drew, for hopping on the channel. For those who don't know Drew, you've probably seen his name pop up a few times with recent GT performances. If you take a look at the top ITC Tau players, Drew is one of them. I'm not sure where you're ranking, but after your most recent GT win, I imagine you're climbing up a little bit. Um, but one thing that I like to do to start out, each interview is to learn a little bit about kind of how you got into Tau and like your 40K journey. So I'll just open it up to you, Drew.
Yeah, good evening. Oh, glad to be here. So my little bit my backstory. I've started playing in second edition, and I was a wee lad. But before I even had a chance to buy any models, third edition dropped, and my first models that I ever actually bought was the third edition starter set with the Space Marines versus Dark Eldar. Um, And I no longer play Space Marines. I had to drop one army, and when Primaris came out, I was like, yeah, it's easy because that's essentially Primaris is like having to start a new army over. And I was like, well, I probably have too many armies anyway. But I still do play Dark Eldar. But in third edition, of course, in I think it was 2004, 2003, the good old Tau launched, and it was a day one purchase. I bought the Codex literally on day one. And the reason that I started the army, this is how a 12-year-old brain functions. Fire warriors back then. So back then, rapid fire, which was like the most common weapon type, was 24 inches. And then Tau came out, and their fire warriors were 30 inches. And I was like, oh my God, that's an extra 6 inches. I can outrange Space Marines and kill them off the board. And so that's literally the reason that I hopped onto Tau. Um, and I've stuck with them ever since. I've absolutely loved their play style. And I did take a brief break in seventh edition because the game just got stupid. I don't know how many people are around that played in seventh edition. Balance, competition, none of those were design concepts of the game for seventh edition, and I was not enjoying it. Hopped off for a couple years, but I mean, honestly, the bug came back in, and then eighth edition, everyone was saying, "Oh, eighth edition's actually good. You should check it out." And I did. Enjoyed it enough to get back. Ninth was absolutely eighth. I was like, yeah, eighth is fun. I'm back in it. But ninth to me, ninth was like the peak. That's the most fun I've ever had playing Warhammer, and that's when I was like all in. Every weekend tournaments. Like ninth, eighth got me my toes back in the water. Ninth sucked me back in, hook, line, and sinker. And I basically haven't stopped. So here we are in 10th.
Yeah, from what I hear, there was like a lot of skill expression towards the end of ninth. Like, if I, it sounds like ninth would have been a lot of fun for a player who started at the beginning of the edition, knew what they were doing, and like were able to kind of apply things that they learned into like the complexity of ninth. Because as a newer player, it was a little overwhelming, but I could see it being a lot of fun looking
Yeah,
back at it.
if you were new in ninth, it was absolutely like drinking by fire hose.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I really started to work on how they had the custom sept rules,
Oh yeah, I heard
and
about this.
right at the end of ninth, I kind of found the killer combination, which was upgunned burst cannons and turbojets, which let your suits move faster. And upgun burst cannons was an extra AP on burst cannons, which were natively one, so it brought them to two. And eight, basically you spammed burst cannons. Your entire arm, 18 stealth suits. When stealth suits actually did damage, you
Mm.
you could reliably kill things, and that was back before toughness went higher than 8. So burst cannons being strength 5 would wound land raiders on 5 plus. And burst cannons were 6 shot even on stealth suits. So stealth teams would like come up, dump 36 shots, and like cripple the land raider. But yeah, and it was one of these things that the not just could you get these little niche builds, but if you got bored with a certain playstyle, you could be like, well, let me try um Sacia Sept. I loved Sacia Sept rules. Um because I guess, kind of going back to third edition, and for those that don't know, because I remember those days well, the Tau were not a suit army. They were basically advanced Imperial Guard, where Imperial Guard were set to mimic like World War One, like 1930s, where it was hordes of infantry and then big lumbering tanks like crossing the trenches. Uh, Tau on release were meant to be like the U.S. Army, where like the Gulf War had like just happened back in the early 2000s, and so movies like In the Army Now, where they would just laser point and missiles would come flying in. That was essentially what Tower. So it was a gun line. You had, instead of guardsmen, you had fire warriors and Kroot, and instead of Leman Russes, you had hammerheads. Um, and I literally think the commander and like suits were locked at 0-1. Like you could only have one suit commander. Um, so I mean, battle suits were still there. There were still crisis teams, still broadsides, but the meat and potatoes of your army were the tanks and the fire warriors, and that's kind of the play style that I got into with Tau. And quite honestly, I haven't left it. Um, for example, I have not fielded a commander battle suit since fifth edition.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, like I know there's the Cold Star, and I know there's the Enforcer, and I think the Cold Star is the fast one.
Yep, he is.
But for me, it's always been about, like, my favorite unit model in the game. Actually, my screen name is the Ill-Tempered Fireblade. The Like that. Normally, my leader is the Fireblade, and or on Anva, who I love Anva and Long Strike.
Rip.
Whoever, yeah, pour one out.
Yep.
Whoever got that was a sad day when Long Strike went away. But so I have always just that's the play style I prefer, and um, I really haven't moved away from that. But Sacia, which had it's like vehicles didn't get hit penalties in combat, was one of them. And because I'm very aggressive with my tanks, and so hammerheads and skyrays are like flying up the board, charging, tying units up, and so it just, to kind of bring it back home to ninth edition. Ninth gave you so many more ways to play the game than detachments are nice, and I think GW is really onto something by releasing these new detachments for like Grotmiss, and I think they knocked it out of the park with the exception of like Star Shatter and Bridgehead. All of the rest attachments were fantastic. And now that Star Shatter and Bridgehead have been bought in line, but like just experimental weapon cadre, right? Like, and they're saying, yep, the new thing moving forward is more detachments, and I think that's great for players like myself that play so often that, yeah, you can get burned out on playing Montka or Cao Yan. Um, so yeah,
For sure, yeah.
I guess
It's great to hear like the synopsis from, rarely I talk to people who were there when Tau dropped, and I remember I played Tau for a little bit when I was 13 in 5th edition, and I actually have a receipt of buying Commander Farsight. I found it in like my Gmail, like in 2012 or something like that. Oshava in that's what it, Commander Oshava. That's what it said in there. So which was pretty cool. But
yep,
you'll have to. So
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, I have that model.
Oh, you do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the old third edition one where I've upgraded him to the new size base. I've thought about running him, which we'll get to it in a minute. We'll get to suits. I have a very controversial subject on Tau for 10th, but
Okay.
I've theory crafted lists with Farsight in it. So I've upgraded him, got him on the new base, and it's hilarious to see how small the model is on um, the bigger base because it's just like comically small compared to its base size. Same with broadsides. Broadsides are the same category. They're on these huge bases, but well, I still have the old broadsides
Yep.
where
The
the
yep.
the
I had a couple of those.
I do have I am you know building or I've got a set. Haven't painted them, but the new missile side broadsides. Um, but yeah, no command. I always said Oshava.
Oh,
I
Shava.
don't know if what the correct pronunciation is there, but
Who knows?
yep,
Well, so Drew, tell me a little about. You've had a lot of success with Kroot Hunting Pack recently. Obviously, you
yes.
just won a GT. So tell me a little bit about what drew you to Kroot Hunting Pack.
All right, so I alluded to it, the controversial take, and here it
Mm.
is. Tau, as an army, are A tier. The problem is battle suits are bad.
Mm.
So if you leave battle suits out of the list, which I just do by default, I don't know why. Like battle suits don't draw my doesn't grip me. And but hammerheads, breachers, right? Fish of Fury, stealth suits, like I do love stealth suits, but they're XV15s are the ones I use. They're basically fire warriors with a jump pack.
Mm.
I love the concept of Tau being Tau and Imperial Guard, the only two armies in 40k that are just normal dudes. Like the closest to a standard military. They're not super soldiers. So suits to me are kind of like breaking that illusion of like just the average grunt going to fight. And so when you look at the Tau have a deep roster of data sheets outside of battle suits. Like I can play many different, like we can go through some of the armies just in 10th that I've run. Because I went 5-1 at a GT just a couple months ago with Cow Yawn. Um, so, but what drew me to Kroot specifically is it it actually started as a meme. Um, and then I played it and I was like, okay, hold on, there's some teeth to this meme, which was the idea of flooding the board, like using Tau as Imperial Guard. Because I also play Imperial Guard. They're another one of my favorite armies. But when I tried to do like how I wanted to play Imperial Guard, mass infantry backed up by mass tanks, they just got clogged. Like the infantry couldn't move fast enough to get out of the way of the tanks. And then like a good opponent would just trap you in your parking lot and you'd just be stuck on your side of the board. And I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm going to play Tau like I would play Imperial Guard. And I called it Astra Militarum.
Mm.
And it was mass infantry, so like fire warriors, Kroot, and tanks. And I learned just in like the first game, I learned two very important lessons. One, Kroot are a hell of a lot faster than guardsmen. And two, Tau tanks fly. And that was back when you could fly infinitely high over terrain. So when fly, you could just go through a wall essentially. And so the Tau tanks did not get locked in your parking lot. Like, you could not trap a Tau tank heavy infantry list in its deployment zone because it'd just fly away. And I was like, okay, I think I'm onto something, because I would use the Kroot to jail my opponent on their side of the board, like Kroot hounds. For example, my Kroot Hunting Pack has like a 93% go first win rate.
Oh my gosh.
Because if I go first, I scout the Kroot up 7, and then they get, for Kroot hounds, if I run 30, which usually I do, they turn 1, they're advancing D6 inches extra, so plus assault and charge. So if like an opponent's in a rhino or something on their backfield, Kroot hounds are tagging it and surrounding it turn 1. Like, I played an Eldar player and I hit his swooping hawks on his board edge on turn 1.
Oh my gosh.
And so where armies like Space Wolf, the Space Wolf jail list, or Skitarii Hunter cohort, kind of the two big other jail lists,
Mm-hmm.
where they don't do a lot of damage to you, but they just keep you in your deployment zone long enough to win the game. That's basically what I'm doing. But there's a fundamental difference. I've got 3 Hammerheads and 3 Sky Rays sitting on the other side. And I've actually had one of my good friends who's he's like one of the top players in the world for AdMech. And he sees how my Crude army plays, because the only realistic way to play AdMech and win is Skitarii Hunter cohort, and you jail them. He looks at my army, he goes, God, you're doing exactly what my army does, but you actually kill shit. And I go, yeah. And he went and he bought Kroot, and he's now switched to playing basically the Kroot horde.
Mm.
And as I played it more, so I brought that army I've been to 4 GTs with the Kroot, the horde version of Kroot, and I was kind of refining it in, and it actually, I started with like 120 carnivores. And as I got more and more experience, I realized it wasn't actually about flooding the board. The science to jail lists is just trapping specific units from specific objectives or pathways. And you didn't need 120 Kroot to do it. I've actually dropped for that horde list, the most recent one I went to, that team event. It was something like 80, because you only need 10 Kroot. A lot of the times you don't need the full 20. I don't run any units of 20 now, because they're a lot harder to hide, and generally speaking, if somebody can kill 10, they can kill 20.
And one thing you said there that I want to hear a little bit more detail around is you're jailing specific units from getting to specific objectives. Can you tell me a
Yes.
little bit more about that, and why you think about it
So
that way? Yep.
perfect example, Chaos Knights. Oh, you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, your video locked up for a second. For example, Chaos Knights. I know that they can move through walls. And so I'm looking and I'm like, well, I've got Crude on the backside of this objective. They're going to sticky it next turn. I have reactive lone op. My threat to these Kroot on this objective is that knight behind that wall. And I know he can move through walls and units once per turn using Knights of Shade. And so I measure the back of his base, and they move, I think, 14, right? Always ask if you don't know exactly what you're moving opponents. Like, yeah, that guy moves 14, right? I think that's what Chaos Knights are. So I measure the back of his base, and I go, okay, he can't end his move within 1 inch of engagement range. So I'll put a Kroot Hound right at 13.9 inches, so that if he Knights of Shades over the Kroot Hounds, he cannot legally end on the far side of them, because he'll be within 1 inch of engagement range of a Kroot Hound when he's trying to make a beeline to the Carnivores on my objective. And so then I fan the Kroot Hounds out in a way that he can't even get close enough to declare a charge. And so I'm only sending 1 unit forward, right? Because when I first played this list, I just flooded the board. I was like, "Woo, Kroot, go right, go off, my friends."
Mm-hmm.
And just too many Kroot units were dying without actually accomplishing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So like that in that case, I traded one Kroot Hound unit for one turn of primary, and then I got sticky on that objective. So like that's kind of how the jail list, when you start to actually refine down its play, it's it's about trading Kroot units for time. And so you thinking what unit is going to screen what on turn one, what unit's going to screen what on turn two, what unit is going to screen what on turn three. And generally speaking, you're hoping to have built a high enough points lead on the first three turns that they simply can't catch up at that point. Um, like at my last team event, I played Death Guard, and he literally did not leave his deployment zone for 2 turns. And by turn 5, I was like damn near tabled, but it was like an 18-2 my way because I had scored so many points. And then the other thing, right, just yeeting random Kroot off in a random direction to contain or, cleanse. And stealth suits. Stealth suits are the best because you're taking them basically to guide. So they're doing that regardless. And then the way actions are worded, they're not ineligible to shoot after guiding. So you guide first and then you contain. Um, so yeah, that horde list went. I think I brought it to 4 GTs and I've gone X and 1. I think I've podiumed at every single GT I brought it to.
Wow.
And there was always just one game, something didn't go right in one game, and that's why it hadn't unfortunately won a GT, but I came in second in like 2 GTs and then
Wow.
third in like the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And so, tell me a little bit about how you like iterated upon that list and kind of came to this GT winning list. Obviously
so
there's one big change, but I actually didn't see it all on the table. I watched like the second half of your game, but tell me a little bit about how you arrived at your GT winning list.
so the other main army that I play, like my other main squeeze right now is Votan,
Mm.
and with them, they're inherently a stat check army. Just the nature of how defensive they're a stat check army. And I found if I leaned into their stat check, right, like triple hecaton land fortresses, it made just by default a lot of matches auto wins. Like as long as you didn't screw up royally, a lot of armies just couldn't match your stat, and you just won. Um, so I happened to be sitting there like looking, how can I improve this Kroot list? And I sat there and I was like, well, Rampagers are something like 5.5 points per wound. They're one of the cheapest per wound units in the game. I think literally Grots might be cheaper, but like even guard squads are 55 points. So a guardsman is the same price per wound as a Rampager. But then I was like, but Rampagers are T6. And that's a fundamentally huge difference. And I decided to try out because the other thing is I just had never tried Rampagers.
Mm-hmm.
The one problem with the Kroot Horde list is that it move blocks very, very well, but the Kroot aren't killing anything. You're relying on the Tau tanks too. And they obviously do a lot of heavy lifting, but certain armies they couldn't carry the game. Like the hardest match for the Kroot Horde for me is Custodes. Because doesn't matter what you do shooting into like when the wardens pop their 4-up, feel no pain. Like they can even eat a railgun. Like if they spike high on their 4-up, feel no pains. And so I I was like, let me try Rampagers. Let me see if I can get some damage out of the Kroot. And I tried them at a couple games, and especially with Kroot Hunting Pack with +1 to hit, +1 to wound, the Rampagers just one squad was delivering, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm onto something here. Then I went to that team event. I had a squad of 6 and a squad of 3, and every single game they were MVPs. Every single game, without exception, I could point to them and be like, that squad delivered. I played an orc matchup, and he smashed into both Rampagers turn 1. He activated the the orcs that had charged the 6-man Rampagers. It was a war boss and like 10 breaker boys. Only killed 2 Rampagers. I interrupt with the 3-man that is also fighting a war boss and a squad of breaker boys. The 3-man, I rolled like 7 sixes on the ramp, like, so I got 7 additional hits
That poor
and
guy.
one, yeah, but they picked up the entire squad, including the war boss.
Oh my gosh.
And then I went back to the 4 Rampagers that were still alive, and then they picked up the squad of 10 boys and the war boss. And I looked at them and I was like, how does it feel to get out meleeed by Tau? Um,
Wrecked.
and I was like, that's only 9. And so we did our team placed 4th, which, you know, behind Stat Check and Art of War, I think we did fairly well.
Sure.
But there was a vendor there that, you know, some of the prize money you could spend right there, and he had 3 boxes of Kroot Rampagers, and I had 9 at that point, and I'm like, well, 3 boxes would give me 18. I was like, I got some prize money here, so I bought them. I literally spent the week painting them up, and then I had bought 3 of the Kroot Hunting Pack army boxes, so I had 3 Kroot Ox unbuilt, but then I had 6 of the old Kroot Ox. So I spent the week building the 9 Rampagers, the 3 Kroot Oxen and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go full 27. Instead of Horde, I'm gonna go full uh monkey, like full gorilla. Yep. So I called it Harambe's Revenge, and
That's awesome.
uh, and I sent 27. Basically, the points worked out perfectly. The foundation for the Kroot Hunting Pack from the Tau side is 3 Hammerheads, 3 Skyrays, 3 Stealth Teams, and Shadowsun.
Hmm.
And why it's that setup is Shadowsun with the Hammerheads, because Hammerheads gets +1 to hit from vehicles, which is their primary target. You kind of get away with not having to guide them a lot of the time. That Shadowsun babysitting some Hammerheads, you because they're native datasheet reroll plus her reroll of the ones, you can an AP5 guiding them. If you don't have something to guide them, you're not really losing anything. And so it just so happens that if I dropped a lot of the carnivores and the hounds and the number side, the points just work out that's 18 Rampagers and 9 Kroot Oxen. And I was like, well, send it. So literally the first game that I had played with that list was in fact the round 1 of the GT.
No way.
And it was into Emperor's Children. And Emperor's Children just hard bounced. They like the Lord Exultants with the infractors or whatever they're called would charge into like even just the Kroot Oxen. Because what I learned is the Kroot Oxen would go out and screen. Like if you watch the Wargames live, you can see me do this, where I send the 3 Kroot Ox squads to the objective, and I stage the Rampagers all right behind to countercharge what comes to hunt the oxen. And the Kroot Ox Riders are essentially a knight in profile, 15 wounds, the 5-up invulnerable, and reactive loan op, the EMP grenade. Like, you have to commit something of substance to clear the Kroot Ox Riders. And then what's waiting for you? 6 Rampagers, a Hammerhead, and a Skyray, right? So I do this with the Emperor's Children, and he literally kills like 2 of the Kroot Ox Riders and the Noise Marines kill like a Rampager. And then on my turn, I basically charge in and kill all of the Noise Marines, because they're just like the Ion Head Hammerhead picks up a squad of Noise Marines. The Rampagers clear the Exultant. The Skyrays bring down the Winged Demon Prince. He loses like 800 points on the clapback, and he only has 2 dead Kroot riders to show for it. Um, and then round 2 was into actually a very similar list played by a very good player. The Necron, very similar to what was in the finals. That's kind of the new. It's the new meta for Necrons is that Awakened Dynasty list, and the same thing. He has to commit the Wraiths or the Scorpex to clear the Kroot riders, and then he loses them. Like 6 Rampagers will clear a Wraith squad on the charge, right? You kill like 1, you shoot enough to kill 1, so they get the +1 to hit. But then once they're the +1 to hit, between the impacts and everything, it'll kill the squad. And so the same thing, the Necrons just couldn't handle the 27 gorillas. Round 3, Emperor's Children again, same result. The Emperor's Children just bounced. Their offensive profiles were atrocious into Rampager stat line, and so just cleared the Emperor's Children with really no, like not even a tough game. Just by nature of how inefficient Emperor's Children profiles were into the Rampagers. Round 4 was Inari, and this one I just knew. I'm like, you there's no way in hell that you're clearing 27 gorillas. So I just start on the line, scout everything forward. I think he even went first too. But I didn't even make an attempt to hide. I was like, yeah, come out and play. Expose as much as you can. And he just didn't even come close to killing me. It just, the Kroot just ultimately walked all over him. And then he has to bring Wraithlords out to try to shoot Bright Lances and punch me in combat. And then, fun fact, Wraithlords don't have invulnerable, so railguns work really good on them. Because I'm talking about all these Rampagers and the Kroot riders, but like, make no mistake, there's 3 Hammerheads and 3 Skyrays sitting in the backfield. So the more you're focusing on the Kroot Rampagers, the less you're focusing on essentially the Tau gun line that's still sitting in the backfield. And then and then the final game was Awakened Dynasty again, and you can kind of see that my opponent, he good guy, good player. He even realizes as he like brings those Wraiths out on turn 1, and because he knows that I'm going to get the full primary, and the only way to stop that is to charge the Wraiths into the Kroot Rampager or the Kroot Riders. I hate that they're called Riders. They should be something else, so that there's like Rampagers and something. But so the Kroot Riders, and of course I have the Rampagers literally sitting on the other side of that 2-inch wall, so I can charge over it. And he's like, "Do you get the impact mortals on the charge?" And I go, "Yes." And he sits there and he's like, "There's no good option here, right? I charge into the Kroot Riders. I have 9 gorillas to deal with, and there's no way in hell the Wraiths are dealing with 9 gorillas. And then I can fall back and charge again and get 2 rounds of impact mortals." So I actually think he correctly deduced not to charge. Like I rewatched the video and you can see people being like, "Oh, that might have been a mistake." But I would have cleared out the Wraith squad with even less effort and gotten kind of a better board position, I think, at the end. But I think that army, having played it 5 games where honestly it didn't even break a sweat, there was like no point at any game where I was like, oh, I might lose this. It was just army after army hard bouncing off of the Kroot bodies, and then the Rampagers and the Kroot gun line, or not the Kroot gun, the Tau gun line, just punishing them so ruthlessly. So from defensively, it's so inefficient to deal with the profiles, and then offensively, Rampagers hit like a freight train. And oh, fun fact, so do Tau tanks. So it's just hyper defensive and hyper damage dealing. So whether I'm onto something, I'm not. I don't quite know yet. I'm.
You don't know yet after you hit it, after you won a GT?
Well, once is nothing, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern.
Okay.
So we only have one result. There were definitely some good players there, but it was a smaller GT. I think we started at like 38 or 40, and then a lot of people forgot that it was Mother's Day, and we actually had a
Ah.
lot of day one drops.
Mm.
So I don't remember what the final number was, but um, yeah, I definitely need to. There's a local major coming up called Iron Weld in Boston, and I'll very likely be bringing that exact list again. And then I'll be going to a team event at Atlantic City Open, and we'll very likely be bringing that list again. So I think within the next month or two, we'll see if I've like cracked a Tau code, so to speak. But just to as a final point, tap even before I stumbled on the gorilla build, the Kroot horde is extremely strong. People like local people in my meta have literally told me they have to plan around my list. And so when you're at the point that players are actively thinking about what to do if they encounter you at a tournament, you're not the worst army in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not. And having played Kroot Hunting Pack Horde for 4 GTs and gone X and one, or what's the term? T-Whip, like in a position to win.
Mm-hmm.
That I could have won the tournament in any of those events. That Kroot Hunting Pack is, unless you're, one of the weird guys. One of the pre-questions that you sent me was, why don't I take Kroot characters or any of the enhancements?
Mm-hmm.
Because other than Rampagers and Krootox Riders, the rest of the Kroot aren't very good. Like you can try to polish a 20-man carnivore squad, that turd, and get damage out of it as much as you want, right? You can put the War Shaper and the Flesh Shaper, but I've math hammered it. I've like played some scenarios, just by myself, and realized even with all of that, you're just not killing very much. And that's perfect world scenario where you've got all 20 and you're getting all 20 in engagement range. And like, yeah, maybe in that case you pick up 3 wraiths. But the Tau backing them up is where the damage of that comes. And why I haven't brought like broadsides, or I have tried a Riptide, and I had decent results with it. The Riptide is actually what I dropped to add Rampagers initially, and then found that Rampagers just are fantastic as a unit. But the main reason that it's Skyrays and Hammerheads is that they benefit the least from any detachment. Like Montka, Hammerhead doesn't give a crap about lethal. You're wounding almost everything in 2s in the game, then you've got the datasheet reroll. Skyrays, Twin Link, same thing. Right, obviously Ret Cadra, no benefit. Experimental, like the new one, yeah. Oh, my railgun goes from 72 inches to 78 inches. Like, oh,
nice.
so
I can shoot the other
yeah,
table now.
yeah. My Ox Cadra, my railgun goes from AP5 to AP6. Unfortunately, ion cannons, even at AP3, the railgun still is. I prefer it in almost most matchups, but the point being that I'm not losing anything by taking those units in Kroot Hunting Pack. They're already pointed with the assumption that they're not getting anything from the detachments. Mm-hmm. I don't actually. The list, I did bring a list that broke the game. GW nerfed it into the ground.
I heard about
you
this.
It was the like 18 Tau tank list. I literally had 2 people from WTC, so like the big world team event in Belgium. I had 2 teams tell me they copied my list to bring to WTC, and one of them you can actually watch on Wargames Live. But the list was 4 Hammerheads because Longstrike was still around, 3 Skyrays, 2 Devilfish and Breachers, 3 Piranhas, 6 Tetras, and I still had points left over for a Farstalker squad. And it was just a mass of Tau tank bodies, and nothing in the game could beat it. It went. I won 2 GTs and like 4 RTTs in a row. It literally went like 28 tournament games undefeated.
Oh my gosh.
And Tactical Tortoise streamed an event, Ides of March. That's where people found out about it. That's where the WTC teams copied it. I was on stream 3 times, and you can just watch 3 games where I just dumpster 3 players in a row.
Gross.
And GW took every unit that was in that list and increased it by 10 points per model. That list went up 240 points, which was 100% deserved, because at 240 points, it went back to the realm of balanced.
Now, when was that? Was that right before
That was
Codex, or was this
that
in the
was
May?
yes.
Yeah, it
Yep,
was.
that
That makes
was
sense. So that's why it hurt
uh
so much when we got the pre-nerf. Oh, that hurt me.
well, Long Strike going away.
Yeah, sure. Sad.
Like that was a sad day.
Mm.
But I've always that's how that list is still 100% viable. That's the one I brought to Ides of March event, which was the 60-person event, and I barely lost to Sam Pope, who's number 2 in the world, like best Tyranid player in the world. Barely lost to him. But that list was, the 3 Devilfish with 30 Breachers, Cow Yawn detachment, and then the 3 Hammerheads, 3 Sky Rays, and then a Kroot Carnivore squad and a Kroot Farstalker squad. Because even in that list, that's just enough Kroot to screen until I can get to turn 3 or turn 2 with one Fireblade had the Exemplar of Kalyan, so that I get to activate them a turn early. And so again, not a single Battlesuit in that list. And it just it there's probably a lot of potential in that list. If I had played it more, brought it to more events, it felt like a very good list. So if anybody doesn't want to play Kroot Hunting Pack, essentially the Tau tank, like mechanized Tau, is still 100% a valid build. It's just as I said before, battle suits are not in a good spot. The lack of split fire, meaning you generally overkill what you're shooting at, and you're not incentivized to split fire like fusion, the fusion guns when you come down.
Mm-hmm.
Suits are not in a good spot, and I know that a lot of Tau players play for the suits, right? They want the Triptide, they want 27 Crisis suits, and unfortunately, those builds are bad. But I, like, without reservation, between Cow Yan, the Kroot Hunting Pack Horde, the Harambe list, I confident would say A tier. Just if from a team event perspective, that list for the GT, the Harambe list was 20-0, 19-1, 20-0, 20-0, 19-1. That was the differential. If that was a team event, that would have been the differential. And we're working on, I haven't finalized. We'll look at whether, because the Horde list can shut down certain armies, where the Harambe list, like Knights, the Horde list is better in 2, because it can really hamstring where Knights and certain armies can move, where the Harambe list is more of, nope, I'm here to table you. I'm not here to jail you. And so those are 2 very different builds from a team perspective. So we haven't finalized our roster, but the Horde list that went to a team event last weekend in New York, my matrix was across the board. And the only game I did lose was into the triple Wraith Necron build, because the reality there, I had that as like a 12. I had that as a small win. And sometimes 4-ups, you just roll hot.
True that.
that he had one. I charged a Rampager squad into a Wraith squad, and he just rolled like a boss on his 4-ups, and I barely scratched the Wraiths. Um, and I looked at him and I was like, well, you just won the game there, because it's like that. Like
Yeah, it's
now I didn't, because I had drawn overwhelming force, assassinate, and it was purge the foe,
oh boy.
and I didn't get any. It was like a 14-point swing. So there's only two wraiths left alive. Like I didn't even kill two wraiths.
Ugh.
Like forget bringing a full squad down, because that's a little less likely.
Hmm.
But killing two wraiths, he just
Yeah,
made
come
like
on.
20 out of 25 4-up invulnerables, and I was like, well, I mean, sometimes that just happens.
Sure.
Uh, but I stand by that. If that fluke, like that, spike at the right time hadn't occurred, I probably would have pulled out a small win.
Mm.
Um, and so when I can take this list and just actually tell my team, here's my pairing matrix, it's all green. So I don't care if you put me out as defender. I don't have a preference for board. I can play on heavy board, because the heavy board, the hordes will lock you in a lot easier. On a lighter board, the hammerheads will shoot you a lot easier.
Hmm.
So it's like, put me out as defender, put me out as attacker, leave me for the scrum. So yeah, for anybody that is down on Tau, leave the suits at home, and you immediately have more validity,
Hmm.
just instantly. So what that means from a balance perspective, because I think GW needs to walk a line that if they buff something in the Tau that's not specific for the suits, that you could very well break the army.
Hmm.
Not that we don't deserve our time to be S tier, that everyone has to plan around,
Hmm.
but I think it's my feeling is that players are locked into a playstyle they want to play.
Hmm.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that is not conducive for winning games with Tau currently as a faction. Um, so you would have to, and just points dropping suits is like the worst option.
Hmm.
And I hope that, like, the idea that you just have horde crisis suits, it just I mean, it's the easy answer. It's the answer that would allow, you know the Kauyon tank builds to not get yeeted to the sun in terms of power level. Like if they change something with guiding, making it, oh, +1 AP if you're guided, right? Something to that effect. Then suddenly, the Kauyon mechanized list is like, oh, let's go, boys, 90% win rate. Uh, so I'm curious, but again, StatCheck had um, Tau at a 37% win rate, and that's including
Yeah, you're
me going 100% for the weekend.
sure.
So Tau are not in a good spot in terms of what players want to play, and that's very evident. And I'll be curious to see how GW addresses that.
Yeah, and so one interesting thing to call out here is I think that your experience early on sounds like was very formative to how you play the army today, and it
Yes.
was based upon like the types of lists that were available to you then, right? Whereas newer players, like myself included, didn't have that influence, and so we're influenced by like when I came back to the hobby 9th, 10th edition, I was influenced by like, whoa, riptides and broadsides look really cool. Ghost keels look really cool. The new crisis suit
Yep.
models look really cool. So that's what's been, I think, to your point, drawing people in, and I think it's a really interesting pocket within Tau that you found success with, because I know like really no one else I don't think has explored that aspect of it. I mean, I think for me personally, like why I ask for buffs for Tau is because I see, like as a content creator, as someone who interacts with the community, newer players really struggle with it, and with some
Yep.
frustrating mechanics, guiding being one of them. But also, those folks, I love Rampagers. I think Rampagers are sick. But those folks, they come into the hobby, they buy their 2,000 point army, they have 10 Kroot Carnivores, right? They
Yep.
don't have 80 Kroot Carnivores. They don't have 18 Rampagers. They've got six, right? So it's like, how do you kind of build a list that isn't, you know, three, four, $500 worth of Kroot, and I think that's where players have some issues because at the end of the day, GW does push more so the suits.
Yeah, and I think from a because at the end of the day, your army is you build and you paint and you have to look at them.
Yeah.
And a lot of players are just like Kroot looks stupid. I don't like Kroot. And I think it's interesting or telling that the response to the new Vespid is exact opposite. Everybody thinks the new Vespid models are amazing. And one of the reasons why is Vespid feel coherent to the
Mm-hmm.
Tau army. They're
Yes.
wearing the chess pieces. They've got like the Tau gun. They're wearing the Tau fate like helmets, like but Vespidized. And you feel like they're part of the army. Kroot, the Kroot Rampagers have a gun. It is a javelin.
Yeah.
Like literally. And when you build the model, it's not like a javelin with like a Kroot or a Tau bomb on the end of it. No, it's a metal spear. There's nothing, there is literally nothing on that model that would tie it to the Tau line. And a lot of play, I think GW misread the room. Like me, I may be the biggest Kroot player in the world, judging by that there's only one of us a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even I look at the Kroot design language from the aesthetic, and I'm like, this is terrible. That's one of the main reasons that I haven't been buying them. That I love the idea of the coalition aspect to Tau. I think that introducing more auxiliaries would be a great way to take the faction.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want. Do you know what Nicasar are? The psychic polar bears.
No.
Well, you
What?
got to do a deep. You got to do a deep dive on the Nicasar.
There are polar
Um,
bears?
so that's how they've been described in the lore. They're actually in the game Battlefleet Gothic. Tau were
No
the
shit.
space combat game.
Uh-huh.
One of the Tau ships was called a Nicasar Dao, and a Dao is like a little Chinese like fishing boat type thing. But they were piloted by this hyper powerful race of psychics that literally use their minds to propel the ship, and they're called Nicasar. And the lore, the literally the interviewers with people, or there's like articles where people are like, "What are the Nicasar?" And the guy literally goes, "Think of it as a psychic polar bear."
That is freaking awesome.
And they're like, so the Tau use them to help travel through the warp and crap. I feel like, having Anva with his little hover round, because the idea is that they're so powerful, they're like atrophied.
Mm.
Their limbs are atrophied. So having like something like a slan, for if anybody knows Warhammer Fantasy, float around on their hover chair and blast people with their brains. But having the Tau hover chair, you know, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the Nicasar to make an appearance in 40K, but um, expanding the coalition feel, and they totally missed the mark on having. There's the old Kroot models actually have some Tau like call outs
Really?
where they'll have pulse bombs and like
Mm.
the old Kroot models. The new ones, I think the sergeant has
Yeah.
an earpiece.
And like one
Yeah,
shoulder
the
pad. Yep.
they should have done that for every single model. Every single Kroot model should have had that shoulder piece.
You're right. Yeah.
And so you can look at it and you're like, yeah, that feels like it's part of the rest of the army. And I know that for me, that's why I did not buy Rampagers. I just had the old Kroot from, way back in the day. And you can even kind of see I painted parts that were clearly leather. I painted them that Tau orange
Mm.
because I wanted them to look like the Tau tank sitting behind them. And I got the effect I was kind of going for with that. You can at least look at them and go, yeah, they feel like they should be part of this army.
Mm.
But I imagine talking with a lot of new players that they just don't like the look of the Kroot model, and I certainly can't blame them for that. And
It's
I
very
think that's
polarizing.
unfortunate.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very polarizing for sure. one thing I'm curious about is have you ever owned a Greater Narlock, and have you ever played it in a game of competitive 40k? What did it do, if so?
So, um, sadly, no,
Oh,
I have not. I have fought against them multiple times, though.
interesting.
Uh, yeah, in third edition, Kroot got basically a standalone army rule set from the White Dwarf magazine, and it was actually kind of interesting. There was Kroot that flew that had wings, and they had different like types of Kroot. And one of my like the local players converted up a full. There was like Kroot snipers, and I think he just cut the blades off of like the Kroot. You know how they have the blades on each end of the rifle, and those were like his snipers. And he got. I don't remember where he got the wings, but he had like multiple squads of the guys with wings. But included in that was he had the Greater Narlock, and so I played against it. Um, and I don't remember it being like particularly good.
Hmm.
Uh, that army was in fact by all measures not good,
Yeah.
but it was fun. um it's a great model. I think that, yeah, bringing back the Narlock would not be a mistake. Just put some Tau tech on it, give it like a rail gun on its back or something. I think they could go places with that. But so no, I did not own a Kroot Narlock, but I have shot them. That's the extent of my experience with the Greater Narlock.
Heresy.
Although it
Um,
is fun as hell to get in Dawn of War. If you've ever played the
I've never
computer game
played.
Dawn of War,
I've never played Dawn of War.
yep, you can get a Greater Narlock and have it just, and then like it like smacks people with its tail. Yeah.
That's freaking awesome.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to circle the conversation back to kind of like balance changes because I know, you know, in the Tau community, it's a hot take to say
Hmm.
Tower and A tier army because that's not most people's
Yep.
experience. Is your experience? I've gone 5-1 and 4-2 at GTS all throughout the edition with Tau, but sometimes it's felt like more of an uphill battle than other parts. Like I would say Index, the end of Index Kalyan felt really strong. I think we were at about a 52, 53% win rate. That felt like a really strong army. I haven't felt that strength since.
Because Long Strike was still there.
Yeah, because Long Strike. Yeah,
And
I.
Anva.
Oh, Anva was amazing. I loved
Yeah,
Anva, and
he tanked anything in the game for one
yeah.
turn.
Oh my gosh, Angron doesn't matter. He was the
Yep.
best, and he had the 2-2 model guys, and it was impossible. I'd never had someone one shot him. Um, he was so good.
Those were actually impactful losses. Those were like in
Yeah,
my
they
list. I
were
ran
100%.
Anva and Long Strike.
Yep.
Those were impactful losses, and I think that definitely took our faction in a negative direction for sure.
And so recently, kind of what we've seen is there's, and I think kudos to you for finding some creativity in this period of time, but less and less people being drawn to Tau, playing Tau at tournaments. So I'm curious from like, if you've thought about this, like from a balance perspective, how you would kind of like approach changing Tau in a way that makes it a little bit more competitive and like I don't want to put too many guardrails on this. I just love to hear your opinion, but the two things that I'm thinking about is changes that don't break Tau but make it a more enjoyable army for like newer players to get into, find some success, but not, clearly what GW is trying to do is avoid, making Tau overpowered like it has been, or a bad player experience on the other end for opponents in the past.
So kind of like what I briefly touched on, um, that when you exclude suits,
Yep.
Tower actually in a decent spot. And so how I would change it, I would not, if I was working at GW and could do what I want, I would not drop points. Um, and I would probably take, yeah, our army mechanic is just clunky, even if balance, if we were 50% win rate, it's a bad feeling rule. I don't know. I don't enjoy it. I don't think many Tau players enjoy the mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so an overhaul of the army rule would just be a better play experience in addition to getting um so like I don't know if you played or if you ever looked up 5th edition. 5th edition to me was the high mark of the guiding system
So I
where
played in fifth
you
edition. I don't even remember the guiding system. So re-educate me.
yeah, it was you had a table of things you could do with a token. And every marker light you actually made a hit roll. You rolled to hit. And if you I actually still have them. I there are these fluorescent green sickle and hammers
Oh
because
yes,
Tau the
yes,
space communists.
yeah.
Um, and I would set these tokens down for every marker light that I hit. And so I had like a bag of like 20 or 30 because some shooting phases you would just crap out that number of marker light tokens. And a unit could use uh, the marker light to do something. And it was either uh, like take a pinning check, which would be like today, kind of like taking a battle shock test,
Mm.
like maybe once per turn, force a unit to take a battle shock, something like that. But back then it was called pinning. So you could use it to pin people. You could take away their cover. You could get +1 to hit, or you could call in seeker missiles. Seeker missiles could only be. It's the best way that indirect has ever worked in 40k. That the Skyray, for example, fun fact, was an indirect fire tank for most of its life. You would hide it in the back, and it when you used a marker light to call in a seeker missile, you didn't need line of sight. So your fire warriors would like paint the target like, and the seeker missile would come in from the back. I think bringing back a table like that um, could open up just a better feeling mechanic,
Yeah.
and that's irrespective of balance.
Mhm.
But you could do something like battle suits get +1 to wound, right? You could hone in on the battle suits because it's really the suits that need help.
Mhm.
The lack of split fires crippling them, and yeah, this just the suits aren't in a great spot. So something that specifically buffs them, like Ret Cadre as like the detachment rule, but maybe don't make it so prohibitive. Maybe that actually might be a good approach. Is rework the detachment rules
Mhm.
because that's not a sweeping change. You could even leave marker light in place, but like make Ret Cadre's rule like not within 6 inches or whatever. Like have it all suits at any range.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's definitely play in Ox Cadre. I'm If I get bored of Kroot, I might switch to 30 Vespid and work on the Ox Cadre for my damage output. But again, that's me being weird. So balance, yeah, because kind of I know I've engaged with the community a lot. I've been in a lot of Discord or chats and Reddits and whatnot, and people love the suits and people want to play the suits, and suits aren't good. So I think maybe reworking Ret Cadre, um, so that can be like if you want to do suits, you play Ret Cadre. If you want to do something weird, you do Ox Cadre. Um, Experimental Cadre was a good attempt. It
Yeah.
just didn't seem to get what it was going for. Um, I don't really know. Yeah, unlock, a simple change like making guiding not penalized for split fire. I don't know, how if that is enough. To me, it doesn't feel like it would be.
I don't.
Um,
I think it would be a quality of life change, would have no material impact on like the win
yeah,
rate
that
or.
would be so. But if you made a mechanic like if you're guided your +1 AP, I think could open some problem. Like all 6 tanks with AP2 burst cannons. Suddenly, I'm like, huh.
I run
Uh,
those in Ox Cadre. They're pretty good.
yep. Yeah. I mean, that's a valid point. I haven't really explored Oxcadra, but I totally forgot that my burst cannons would be that much better.
Your list in Ox Cadre would do quite well.
Yeah, rewatching the video that was the one question everyone kept asking: why not Ox Cadre? And I'll be
Hmm.
totally honest, I actually didn't even factor in that my burst cannons would be AP2. That might
Oh,
make change math a little bit,
your Sky Razor
but
AP4. That's
I, yeah, most of the stuff that I have problems with have invulnerable saves,
okay, fair.
so that's kind of why, like guard, I just laugh at guard. Like no invulnerable save, you just die.
Yeah.
The armies that give me problems um, is when the railgun is no longer AP5. It's effectively only AP1 because they have a 4-up invulnerable, or AP2 because they're custodies and have a 4-up invulnerable. And so when I hear these high AP numbers, I kind of devalue high AP. But like AP1 to AP2, a lot of armies you're not interacting with their invulnerable save yet, like custodies, case in
Hmm.
point.
Yeah.
Um, so shooting AP2 burst cannons into custodies feels a heck of a lot better than shooting AP1 burst cannons. But yeah, the main reason I didn't play was first off, the 5 from vulnerable is massive.
Yeah.
The plus one to hit for being under starting strength is essentially all the time. You just, even if you're only the only Kroot unit coming up on a full health, just chuck a grenade because all the Kroot Rampagers have grenades.
Yeah.
The dude on top. So you chucked a grenade. Now I'm plus one to hit. So you took mortals and I'm plus one to hit. So the detachment rule is so easy to get off. The army's effectively hitting everything in melee on twos, which is also why I didn't bring a lone spear. It,
Yeah.
it
There's no reason.
yeah, essentially I'm re-rolling ones at that point, so I'm not spending 100 points or 80 points to re-roll ones.
Sure.
Um, but Ox Cadre, all of the damage buffs, it's hilarious how many abilities they had in common. They have extra AP, they have a fallback mechanic, and then they have like a way to increase slash reroll wounds. And the detachments from a damage perspective looked very, very similar, but Ox Cadre, you had to use CP to do all of that, where a lot of that came from the inherent rule of Kroot Hunting Pack, which is just active all the time. And so that and that when you look at the two factions having the similar damage capabilities and utility with the fallback, um, Kroot Hunting Pack still have a 5-up invulnerable.
The 5-up
You know,
invulnerable is crazy. Like 30 wounds
yeah,
at T6 with a 5-up invuln is
yeah, and even the 6-up in melee, right? It goes to a 6-up
sure.
in melee, but it's still like I get one or two of those against a squad of Scorpec Lords that are forward flat for damage. Well, gee, you went from killing two Crude Oxen to killing one, and now those 5 kill you. Um, so that, and it's so obvious how impactful the invulnerable saves are every single game. I might switch off just to see, but my guess is that when Fruit go essentially from a state, or, shrugging 33% of incoming fire to shrugging none of it, because a 6-up save, you know, I think the survivability, all other things considered, just keeps me lean towards Kroot Hunting Pack.
Hmm.
But
You make some good points there because I think the damage ceiling is higher in Ox Cadre just because of the reroll wounds. Like sure, +1 to wound is great, but the reroll wounds is my invuln. That's my invuln killing unit is the 6 rampagers with 1 CP reroll wounds. But
yep, no,
the
I can
issue,
see that.
yeah, the issue is getting there, right? To your point, like although the 18-inch loan up is really nice, you are typically dealing with armies who might hit you first because they
Yeah,
are
I
willing
only
to enter that 18-inch loan op and kill 3 or 4 rampagers, which then that becomes kind of a problem.
Yeah, and Kroot Hunting Pack, of course, have access to 18-inch. It is actually funny how similar those two detachments are
Yeah,
for the army that I play. And I only used it twice in the entire tournament.
sure.
One was a Wraith Lord trying to shoot me with Bright Lances, so really like not shrugging that much damage, but I didn't want him to spike high and kill two.
Hmm.
And the a Doomsday Arc, but yeah, it's just because it's always in my mind, like, ooh, I can use it here, I can use it here, and it just never presents itself,
Sure.
and you're just like, well,
Yeah, because I'm sure
it's
people
yeah,
are like they're lining up 2 targets, and they're saying, okay, you can 18 line up one of them, or they're just getting with an 18 and just not giving the opportunity.
Yep. Which is why I think 30 Vespid get really interesting because
Mm-hmm.
you deep strike them right every turn you uppy downy the 30
Mm-hmm.
and you just have Farsight Marksmans or Ghost Keels or Shadowsun or somebody who have natural 12-inch loan up positioned around so that your 30 Vespid can drop like at the back end of their range, I think 18 inches for their neutron blasters, but then definitely outside of 18 inches for something that can retaliate against them. And then you just pick up the 30 because, giving them the extra AP and their reroll wounds, and then you drop somewhere else. At least that's how my brain is looking. I've played one game with that, and it actually worked very well. But I
Interesting.
haven't. That was just a pickup game with a friend.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah,
but
Shadowsun gives the reroll ones, which is kind of nice.
yep,
They still benefit
yep.
from that. Yep.
So, yeah, which the Kroot Ox Riders benefit from too,
Mm-hmm.
hilariously.
Yeah.
So they'll be hitting on threes with their autocannon when you're getting the 4 shots, 12 shots, hitting on threes, rerolling ones from Shadowsun. Suddenly the Kroot Ox Riders are nothing to scoff at either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my opponents, every game that I rerolled Kroot from Shadowsun, they're like, wait, he works on Kroot?
Yeah, the reroll doesn't
And it's
say
like,
only Tau units can reroll.
well, almost like I see where they're coming from. Almost every other rule, excluding Kroot,
Yeah, yeah, sure, it's
right?
true.
But nope, hers is just Tau Empire. Um,
One other thing that I was curious about, Drew, was kind of going back to Rampagers, is have you considered them in other detachments? Have you kind of like Kalyan, for example? I saw a Kalyan player at a team tournament. He ran 9 of them, and I think he went 4-1, if I remember correctly. But just curious, like, have you considered them after having so much success with them? Have you considered them in other detachments?
I 100% overlooked on them. Overlooked them. 100%. Um, so yes, I'm definitely doing the math on where they could be used elsewhere. And so yeah, Cao Yan, the right breacher fish, still one of the strongest units in the game. Like unreservedly, when you get the extra AP, and if they're on an objective with Cao Yan, and you get the sustain 2, breachers just and then the new tempting trap strat where it's +1 to wound. Like
Oof.
they picked one squad of breachers, brought down Magnus from full health. Magnus was like came over, killed something off an objective. I rapid ingressed the squad, and so it was turn 3. They move up. I use tempting trap on the objective, and then the extra AP, and then Magnus just vanished.
This is with the
Um,
with the Fireblade.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so Cao Yan with Breacher Fish is absolutely still on the table as a playable army, and I would not be opposed to running Kroot Rampagers in it just to see how that looks and how it works. I would have to be a little more cautious, not having the invulnerable saves, and of course they won't hit as hard. That might be a case where now I even have to stop myself. That the Lone Spear is just too much for full rerolls. It's
Yeah,
just too much.
it is.
Um, 80 points is another squad of 3 Rampagers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I would rather have 3 more Rampagers in every situation
Mm-hmm.
than a Lone Spear giving me full rerolls. So having said that, I'm only hitting on threes, and I don't get extra AP, and I don't get +1 to hit or wound. Um, but still, seeing that how much they can kill in Kroot Hunting Pack when they are powered up, I can kind of establish a baseline of what they'd look like when they're not powered up. And so like jump pack intercessors, right? uh
They're done.
a couple 8 bound that make it through your screen and now suddenly tag you, and oh, guess what, you can't fall back because we're 8 bound. It's like, well, rampagers can come over here and help me out. So yeah, I definitely slept on Rampagers and Kroot Riders. They're make no mistake, Kroot Riders are basically Rampagers that don't get sustained. So they still hit just as hard. You might have one less attack from getting a sustained roll. So Kroot Riders, I may actually look to them first because they from a extras right. Kalyan is there to table you at range, and Kroot Riders can help with that. The 12 autocannon shots at 18 inches
Do they
or
get the
6
sustain
beyond.
too?
No, because they won't be.
They get
It
sustain
has.
one?
It has to say. I'm just going to look it up real quick. It
Yeah,
has
right.
to say excluding Kroot. Um,
What if it doesn't?
that'd be hilarious. But then Vespid, I'd also be
Oh,
looking at Vespid too.
true. Yeah, I gotta
Um,
check this.
I'm not sleeping on Vespid. I haven't switched to experimenting with them yet. Carry on. Oh my God. It just says Tau Empire. Okay, hold on. Let's make sure we're reading this together.
Yeah, yeah.
From the third battle round onwards, ranged weapons equipped by Tau Empire models from your army have the sustained hits 1 ability, or the sustained hits 2 ability instead, while targeting their unit spotted unit. So it sounds like Kroot Riders do indeed have the sustained 1, as do Vespid.
Hmm.
How interesting. Yeah, so that would actually that 100% pushes me to Kroot Riders. Um, because they're almost the same.
Sure.
Um, but Rampagers have the impact mortals, which is great, but it's too swingy.
Exactly. It's inconsistent,
I
which that's my
I
own.
can't
Yep.
I cannot depend
Yep.
on so it's like icing on a cake. I'll be like, hey, I just randomly did some mortals. That's cool. But I cannot depend on it. Because I cannot depend on it, I'm devaluing it. And so I'll look at the Kroot Riders autocannons, which, right, let's say 2 of those get through. Well, that's 4 damage. That's probably what I would have gotten as mortals.
Hmm.
And so now that I see that I also get the sustained ones, yeah, I would Kalyan, I would definitely be leaning towards the Kroot Riders, 100%. But they're essentially the same role.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, they pick up the first wave of shit that your opponent throws at you.
yep, and they're just durable enough that your opponent has to commit something of significance so that they're inherently trading down because Krudok's right, a 3-man unit is only 90 points. And not many things in the game at 90 points are going to be killing Krudok's riders. So you have
Yep.
to expose more.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you expose more, Tau Gunline says hello. Um, so yeah, that would be no, the now right that I have definitively proven that Krudok's riders and rampagers are a hidden tech for that, whether we like them or not, right? If you're a competitive player and you want Tau to succeed, it seems very much like leaning on rampagers and oxen in your game plan is going to be until we see like a balance update the way forward.
Yeah. I I would agree 100%. Like having that counter charge threat is so important because usually we put up the screens die, and then our guns shoot stuff, right? And if the guns don't kill
Yep.
everything, then they're sitting on objectives. We don't have something to like screen their rapid ingress, so they fill a lot of holes in my experience, and I've run them. Yeah, I mean I run them in every Ox Cadre list, obviously that I play, and I've pretty much been maining that for the last I don't know 6 months or something. However, how long has it been? 5 months since it came
Oh,
out.
for yeah, that was in Grotmas. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, I've been running Kroot Hunting Pack basically since the Codex dropped. I looked at the rule set and I was like, hold on, I have stealth and a 5-up invulnerable. This was when I was horde focused,
Mm-hmm.
which is still 100% valid. The Kroot jail is a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
and um, yeah, I there's obvious and clear advantages to Ox Cadre, but it's like 6 in one, half dozen in the other.
Mm-hmm.
they're so similar in capability. You're kind of splitting hairs over the invulnerable save versus things like, to me, it might be interesting, the AP2 burst cannons. I might see, because that's not insignificant. When you got 6 tanks, that's 40, I 30, 42 shots of burst cannons. So yeah, a lot of players discredit that. They like kind of scoff at, and it's why I don't run the indirect,
Mm-hmm.
because the indirect, it's like, oh yeah, you might pick off a fire dragon, but burst cannons, you're picking up the whole squad if
Yeah.
they expose themselves.
Especially
And
the way that
so,
you're playing them, right? You're running them up the table. You're not like peeking
oh
angles, right?
yes, so if you want to see how a, like a non-Kroot, like a tank list, a mechanized Tau list,
Mm-hmm.
if you look up Tactical Tortoise Ides of March from last year, basically that list is still, it went up 240 points. The Tetras are in it. They obviously no longer exist.
R.I.P.
But
again.
um, yeah, although stealth suits, full rerolls to hit, and now it's reroll, hit, and wound rolls a 1. They basically fill the exact same role.
Sure.
Tetras just were T7 with 9 wounds, so they're obnoxious to kill. Um, but yeah, I will have absolutely zero reservation about slamming hammerheads forward. I've played um, games where, like into Eldar or Guard, where Kroot actually are more important than hammerheads, because I admit there are matches where hammerheads, their railgun is a waste. And so when I'm like, well, you know what? A T10 14 wound chassis is never a waste. And so I've literally yeeted hammerheads, like turn 1 advanced straight at the enemy. And it's like, yep, deal with this while my Kroot secure objectives and prepare to screen you the following turn. And so, in that situation where the hammerheads are just screaming forward with burst cannons blazing. Um, yeah, I have no one. Everything in my army serves the greater good, and I have nostalgia for nothing. And so, sacrificing 100 hammerheads to get 5 primary, we'll do it every day, twice on Sunday.
Spoken like a top player who bought the Codex day one.
Yeah, that's how I've always played them, as basically an advanced analog to Imperial Guard.
Mm-hmm.
And I still very much enjoy it. Um, and there's lots of ways, like, yeah, the amount of ways that I've come up with lists that don't use suits. um, I brought a Riptide to a tournament, and everyone in the tournament store was like, "Oh my god, he's fun. He's actually running a suit." And I only had the Riptide because I was literally given it. Um,
Man, that's funny.
but no, I've been collecting more suits. I will play once they're literally, I'm in my hobby spot right now, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally surrounded by unpainted Tau and half built Tau suits. So I'm working my way towards like Ret Cadre. Um, but in the meantime, I'm having a hell of a lot of fun with mechanized Tau and Kroot for sure.
Damn right. Well, I think that's a good place for us to uh, put a bow on this. Thanks so much, Drew, for hopping on, chatting a little bit with me. I'm sure um, viewers really appreciate hearing from other members of the Tau community, hearing about their successes, and maybe you just inspired a few more Kroot Hunting Pack players out there to buy up a bunch of Kroot, and yeah.
There was a brand new Tau player at the GT. It was one of his first tournaments. He actually didn't even get a painting score because all of his models were still unpainted.
Uh
And he
huh.
was a younger kid, like
Sure.
14, 15 years old.
Uh huh.
And he was every game he like came up and was like asking questions
Oh,
about
that's
like, oh, what
awesome.
should I do for Tau? And after I won the tournament, he's like, I guess I'm going to be buying some Rampagers.
Damn
So,
right.
yep. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Yep, you heard it here first, gentlemen or ladies and gentlemen listening. Tau A tier.
Tau A
You just
tier.
got you just got to leave. You got to leave the battle suits at home. Sorry.
Clip that,
Sorry.
guys. 18 Rampagers is the way. Well, yeah, thanks again,
Uh,
Drew.
yeah.
And yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, and thanks everybody for sticking to the end of the video. Shout out as always to our channel's patrons. If you want a chance to play me in a game of 40k, see all the TTS games that I play, and see videos early, check out the link down below. But that's going to do it for today's video. Appreciate you all tuning in. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.